So, guys, I do want to talk about The Crow, and this is more about the themes of The Crow and how it relates to me. And what happened was, I went to the Cinemark Theater in Northaven, Connecticut, and I watched the film. And there's a difference between review and themes. Review is more like you're analyzing the quality of something. Themes are more like what does the story actually mean to you, or if there are very direct themes, you know. So I just don't think it would be fair to put it in a review video because this has a multitude of themes. The first thing I would say to you guys is that The Crow represents the 90s because in the early 90s, there was a huge issue of crime in America. There was also a huge issue of violence in media because also, there was Jerry Springer, and there was a lot of other controversial television. So news became more violent. I believe there was also like the L.A. riots, and there were other like violent things in the early 90s. So when you watch a film like The Crow, it's definitely reflective of that era, of just of excessive violence. It's also a film that's very influenced by 1970 films like rape revenge films. Um, I Spit on Your Grave is a good one of them. I do think that it's also when you see a lot of shootouts, it's reminiscent of Scarface. A lot of John Woo films where it's like gun them up type of thing, or even RoboCop. I also think when you watch the film, um, definitely, it's also meant to be an adult comic book film because it was based on a graphic novel, and usually graphic novels or comic books they make this for children. Really, this one was like one of the first films to say no, it could be for adults, and I think it is actually the first film. I don't think that there was like an R-rated superhero graphic novel type of film before this one. I know Fritz the Cat was based on a comic strip, but um, this was more into like the Crow was even considered a pseudo superhero because he's not really a superhero, but he has superhero type abilities. So definitely this could be considered the first like R-rated superhero film or a pseudo superhero. So it reflects the violence of the 90s, and I think it was also thematically made to be an adult superhero film in a time where, they would try to make things for kids. I also think it's reflective of the musical culture. There's a lot of just, heavy metal, grunge music, punk, The Cure is playing songs, and you can see like people with like all the crazy 1990s or 1980s hair. So it really took you into that, in that world of the 90s where that was popular. I would also kind of say that also in the 90s, films were becoming a little bit more violent. In the 70s, films were very violent and they showed sex. And what happened in the 80s is that they tried to make things for family to be more commercial. And with The Crow, it kind of turned back into saying that okay, there is an audience for violent and adult themed films, and not everything has to be family friendly. So it is also just like with the film Deadpool, like the first Deadpool film was meant to be a rebellion against the status quo by saying, you know what, there's an audience for everybody. You can't just like water things down for kids. So I think that that's also thematic as well. I will say that I think the other themes with it is living by the sword, dying by the sword. Like there's character like all the murderers and criminals in this film. They committed crimes that they committed crimes, and then 1 year later they ended up being murdered by one of the people that they've destroyed. Really, one of the people's lives that they destroyed. So, there's a sense of, what would have happened if they spent a year atoning and changing their behavior? Would he be forgiving, or would he actually just still do it? But there's a sense of saying, you know what, at least you killed yourself, you killed the evil version of yourself. So there's a sense of living by the sword, dying by the sword. That sometimes, justice does happen, and sometimes, horrible people face horrible consequences. That's not always true. I do think the other theme is really closure because obviously Brandon Lee died. This film was made to kind of to have people kind of mourn him, and it also kind of showed this character as an avenger, but also somebody who was very human and gentle and kind. Really, So I do think that I like that about The Crow as well. Really, it shows and that's probably very true about Brandon Lee. You know, like his father was Bruce Lee, this great big badass, and he was always trying to like be in the steps of his father, and maybe he's a more kinder version of his father, or maybe he's not seen as that intimidating really. So there probably was a sense of, I think in a way, um, when you watch this film, a sense of everybody trying to make closure with Brandon Lee's passing on the project, and and closure in general, because obviously the film is about a person trying to avenge something that very horribly happened to his girlfriend, that she was raped and killed, and suffered for like 30 hours. So the film does talk about, like, I think closure, and also how some people struggle for closure, and some people's struggle is trying to get even with the people who have done wrong. And there's films like this, and there's situations in reality where people can get vengeance on the people that wrong them, or wrong people that hurt them, or hurt people that they care about. And then there's situations where there are no consequences. So I do think that this film represents closure and revenge, and also setting things right. Really, I also think this film talks a lot about anger, and I think the theme of it is, when you look at like Eric Draven's character, to me he represents somebody that's just high octane with rage and anger, because obviously what people did to him, and he's almost justified in his actions. You don't feel a remorse for any of the people that he killed. Really, you may say it's some of the violence is a little over the top, really, but I think again they raped and killed his girlfriend, and they have a pattern of arson and causing mayhem and destruction, really. So if he punished them in very Dantean ways, ways that feel kind of fitting, the punishment matching the crime, really, you don't feel that much remorse for the people like who he kills, really, because they kind of deserve it in a way, So, but also too, what happens when you have a personality like that has nonstop rage like he does. He knows how to control his rage, but he's definitely an example of something that may be inspiring to people to just get even with bad people, or make consequences on bad people. But that's definitely not always the most moral thing to do, really. For example, I work at a hospital. I was picking up work time in the psych ward. So there was this kid that got mad, and he was throwing chairs. And I remember like cleaning the place, and he was like throwing like trash cans filled with like trash, or from bathrooms. So there's like menstrual stuff and whatever. And I remember, that I wanted to put hands on him, and if he threw anything at me, I would love to kind of pin him down and beat his ass, really. But maybe like the character of Eric Draven, he would do something like that. Or he would probably do something like, or maybe lock him in a trash can and throw it off a cliff or something like that, But when you have a character like Eric Draven, he may encourage people to be like, okay, when you're hurt, it's okay to just have so much anger and so much rage and just create a bunch of chaos. That's not always the best approach, really. So when you watch this film, it is kind of about a character that's allowed and is justified in just having nonstop rage and violence and just ongoing, really. So and that can be and that could be an issue. That's always an issue, because that's not how the real world works. And also, two wrongs don't make a right. And then the other thing is that sometimes it can inspire people to just say, okay, well, maybe he's a character to idolize. He's more of an anti-hero. You can't live in a world where you just cause nonstop chaos, really. And then the other thing, too, when you watch this film is he doesn't really care about the other criminals. Just the four people that raped and killed his girlfriend. And then he helps Sarah at the end because he cares about Sarah. So he definitely is a character with selfish intentions. He could have just said, okay, well, Top Dollar and a few other people in the organization, they just need to be, they need to lose their lives. That's the best way of just ending all these problems in Detroit, really. But no, he doesn't care. He's more about if he's allowed to get his revenge, and they said, okay, you handle these four people, goodbye, really. Then a year or two later, there'll be another crow or whatever. There'll be another person who goes down a streak of violence because because you didn't eliminate the problem, really. He cares more about getting revenge than anything else, really. So he's not he's an anti-hero, and that comes from being a character that's so like consumed by rage. I also will say that I think that when I watched this film, and I think the next theme is vengeance, and I think when I watched this film, I was being bullied a lot in middle school. I heard the story about my mother being abusive, and that's why I was put in foster care. That's why my brother was put in foster care. So when I watched the film The Crow, I remember one of the first scene I saw was like when he ties somebody into a car, puts like a flare by his crotch, and then the car explodes, and he creates that crow fire image. So I remember, I think as a kid, just thinking that was really cool and liking him because he was allowed to get vengeance and he was allowed to kind of wear his rage, really. So sometimes I think this film is about revenge, and I think that sometimes it can encourage a viewer of this film to think that revenge is okay, really. And that's not okay when you're going on a killing spree, or it's not okay when you even if you get back at people and you kind of just hurt them in ways that you may think is right, but sometimes two wrongs don't make it right. Sometimes the world's not fair, and sometimes it may be right to kill somebody, but it's never right to kill somebody. Like, again, if somebody was raped as a child and you tracked down that person and then you put bullets in the back of them, people would understand where you come from, but that vengeance, there's consequence for that vengeance. I don't even want to talk about this anymore, but I know like with the 40 Hour Film Project, where I was being bullied by city producers, I've had some of their friends talk about my race, and they've kind of not, and they've always kind of really helped out the people in the organization versus treating me fairly and just recognizing problems. So I remember, like, as I said, I've kind of exposed city producers who have treated me differently, and a bunch of people could say that's harassment. Some people may say that's revenge, but it is revenge. Either way, so even if you look at a film like The Crow, it's kind of a reminder that sometimes, when we look at revenge, is it actually, is revenge ever justified? In this film, I think we can all agree that people who just live lives just hurting people and causing destruction and chaos, A Time to Kill, is it ever right to just take people out of this world? Is it ever right to get your revenge if you feel like that's the best revenge? You killed this person, I kill you, eye for an eye, really. I think that's also one of the themes, and I think that I think that's also really, really important. I think that when you look at this film, that's also the idea, eye for an eye, really. And as I said, you look at what Eric Draven's character was. He really was only about killing the four people that sexually assaulted and murdered his girlfriend. And then when Sarah's like a 40 daughter to him, so therefore he actually cared about getting even with her, make sure she was safe. But otherwise, if he was allowed just to get rid of those four people, he wouldn't have not cared about getting rid of the mafioso. So I do think that, also part of Eye for Eye is not caring about making a difference. It's more about getting even with people. So I do think that, it's a very thematic film. And I really just like this film a lot. It makes you think a lot, and I would just say too that in my life, when I watched the film The Crow, I really liked this character because I went through a time where I was hurting, I was sad, I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I was thinking of suicide. I had suicidal thoughts from the time that I was maybe 6 or 8 years old all the way to my mid-30s. So when I was younger, I kind of wish I was like Eric Draven, where I had that ability to be shot and gunned down and then in my own like masochistic way, just always kind of resurface really. And as somebody who is mixed race and went through a lot of racism, I wish I kind of looked like that character, like the straight black hair, the trench coat, the really white skin. Even though that's face makeup, I kind of he represents a lot of my identity. I like what I felt was a look that I wanted to have really, but also I think deep down he had power, and the power he had was being able to express how he felt really, and create like a lot of revenge from the way he was hurting inside or the way other people have wronged him. When I've been in situations as a kid, whenever I acted out, and whenever I try to stand up for myself, my parents would put me in my place. Like I think he represents to me a character of power, and his power was that he was allowed to feel what he needed to feel, even though he did it in a way of revenge, versus a person like me, which was taught repression and moving on from people who are hurtful and still hurt others really. So it's a very complicated character. It's a film with a lot of different themes. And I want to do another video about the themes of The Crow.